Welcome to another episode of Use Your Words podcast. Today we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite topic. And when I say everyone's favorite topic, I mean the topic that no one ever really wants to address. That is accountability. How are we accountable to one another as Christians? And what does that look like? And why is it difficult at times? And what are some of the messy lessons that me and Aaron have learned along the way while holding each other accountable on things? Let's get into it. Welcome to Use Your Words podcast, where we believe in intelligently spoken conversations. So, and I will admit, like I said, I can talk or not. Yeah, or not. Donald Duck sneeze. Insert.
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself.
How are you doing, Mr. Johnson?
Oh, I'm okay.
All right, good to hear. Well, welcome to another episode of Use Your Words podcast, where I got myself, Paul DeArmond, and Aaron, who just broke his shoulder, Johnson, in front of me as he went to stretch his arm.
Oh, my muscles.
He's becoming an old man and falling apart right in front of me. It is entertaining. Earlier, he was complaining about his leg. Now he's complaining about his arm. But regardless, welcome and thank you for joining us on this episode where we talk about accountability. Aaron, I was like, Aaron, what do you want to talk about? He's like, accountability. And then he went through all the scenarios and I was like, all right, let's do it. And so here we are.
Wow.
Yep. So that being said, since Aaron wanted to talk about it, Aaron, get us started, kick us off. What do you have to ask about, talk about, imagine about?
I guess for as far as accountability goes, I don't know. I guess I find it a difficult thing to do as of late. Now that I really start to think about that kind of stuff a little more, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the things that came to my mind were about just why does it seem to be a difficult task to do? I suppose more so of that than what is it all about. But I mean, obviously, that's an important thing to know, is to really know like what accountability really, I guess, is for those, I suppose, that might not know, which I'd imagine most people would have an understanding of what accountability is. But I mean, that's something you and I have done in ways with each other's as far as accountability goes, and along with the good old late and great Mr. Brewer, just late to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Not really, yeah. But
okay, so you're finding it a little difficult to do. So let's break down accountability from the beginning.
Yeah.
So what are some of the questions, comments that you find difficult about accountability?
What do I find difficult about accountability?
Yeah, what are some of the questions that you have about accountability?
I mean, gosh, well, one,
okay,
is why is it important?
Why is it important? Why is accountability important? Now, let's frame this. How we're defining accountability. We're defining accountability in this regard inside the Christian context. Christian to Christian, person to person. We're not defining accountability in this regard as you're taking responsibility for. Well, it might involve this, but it's not like Aaron went down and burnt down a building. Okay, it's why is he not being held to the same standard in the law, and why isn't the law enforcement being accountable and holding him to that same standard as everyone else? That's a whole other conversation. And what we're talking about is the Christian context of Aaron goes, I looked at porn today. Yes, I went straight there.
Ow.
Did I touch on something sensitive here?
I was gonna bring that up though, as far as because I give you props on it, because there's the thing is the Ever Accountable app,
which
I have removed myself again from.
Yep, I just checked and I see 0 active devices for you.
Yeah, so you brought that up to me one day, and I was just like, oh, I was like, I'm gonna see how I do without it again. Yeah, we'll see how long that goes. But but no, yeah, I guess as far as why is it important? Gosh,
So
yeah, go on.
I said, let me answer by why I think it's important first, and then I'll ask you if you have any comments. How about that? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it important? Why is accountability between Christians important? Now, that's why I had to define it as that way, as accountability between Christians. Whether that's you're in a part of a small group or where you're a group of friends, helping each other live as close to God's teaching as possible. However that looks, whether that's a mentorship or that's a mentor-mentee relationship or that's a one-on-one friendship type thing, that conversation, how that looks, it changes for every single person. It's not going to look the same between each group at all. How me, you, and Josh do it is going to look completely different than how person X and person Y do it.
Right.
And so why it's important is secrecy lives in darkness. Sin lives in darkness. Evil lives in darkness. Now you're going, wait, all three live in darkness? Yes. All three of those things hate the light. And I'm not talking about the metaphysical idea of Jesus is light and God is light, and therefore they hate God. While that is true, they also hate the light as in exposure. When you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, exposure of that is usually like you don't want that to be exposed. You don't want people to find out about it. You go to a certain part of town where you're not supposed to purchase, let's say, adult things.
Yeah.
You don't want to be caught walking out of it by your pastor who happens to be walking by to go to his favorite restaurant across the street. That's something you would be like, oh, not me, as you're throwing everything down to the ground behind you, going, not me. You did not see anything here. Think of stuff like that where you are embarrassed to be seen by it, doing it. If you weren't embarrassed by it, you'd be like, hey, look, pastor, look what I have in my hand. You wouldn't. If there's that shame, there's a reason we have that shame, because we know, hey, that might be doing good, what we should be doing, sort of deal. So that's what I said. Those things, darkness, sin, and bad things, don't like the light. They don't like to be exposed to that light. They don't like to be there to be seen by the world and by everyone. We want to keep it hidden as much as the way. And by being accountable, you're opening yourself up to let other people shine that light into the deep, dark corners of your soul and see what you're doing. Now, you have to be honest in order for that to happen.
Yes.
Because because me and you may be accountable with each other, that doesn't mean that I am sitting inside your basement all night, shining a flashlight on you, watching you with a webcam or anything.
Oh, I see what you're doing, boy.
That's not what it means. It means that you have to say, hey, I screwed up. I did this. And that same thing for me, where I have to go, I screwed up. I did this.
Yeah.
There has to be that transparency, that honesty, that openness. You can't just be like, and just hide it away.
Put the walls up.
Because you hide it away. Okay. Today it's looking at porn. Tomorrow it's something else and something else. And it leads to sin.
Yeah.
What you may be hiding may not necessarily be sin. It may not be an evil thing, but you aren't sharing that and it continues to grow. And eventually it may lead to sin.
Mm-hmm.
It may lead to doing something wrong. People are going, well, that's not sinful. Remember, we're talking about in context of Bible-believing Christians, not what the world at large says is quote unquote right or not.
Yeah.
So that accountability is necessary for that to be able to grow. Accountability is necessary to be able to say, I am doing the best I can to become a better Christian, a better person, to live rightly as God has said so. And that is not something that comes easy. And that's why it is very, very hard.
So that's also not a natural thing for us to want to do.
No, it isn't.
Well, mainly, as you by saying it's not easy. It's not the natural thing for us to go to.
Yeah, and we've gotten to a point where American culture is kind of, in a way, opposite of Christian culture. American culture is very independent, very, I will do what I need to do. I will be the cowboy. I will be out there alone and solo and do that. Where Christian culture says you need to be in group, you need to be in community, you need to be open about what's going on. Because only then can.
So that's the only way it can happen.
Well,
because otherwise, then, I mean, if you're all on your own, you're not being held accountable to anything or anyone.
Yep. And also,
other than yourself, but at some point, you're just going to get lazy with it and be like, it's fine.
Yep. And the other thing about being accountable, why it's necessary, is these may be a struggle or a weakness that you have in your life that someone else that you're talking to, and not, when I say being accountable, that doesn't mean you go up to every single stranger and you go up to,
hey, so what have you been doing lately?
You're like, oh, you were my third grade teacher. Do you know I look at porn now? You don't do that.
Can you help me with this?
That's not what you do. You find people that you trust and you talk to them and you have those conversations.
Yeah.
And maybe they've gone through something, or maybe a similar situation that can help you. Maybe they can give you tips, tricks, pointers. But also they can go, they'll see you and they'll go, hey, Aaron, how are you doing with it? And they don't necessarily have to say what it is, especially if you're out in public. They're just checking in on you.
Yeah.
Because part of accountability, I have someone checking in on me. It's like, I know I need to be a little more mindful. And because humans, we're very spatial. And when I
like my space.
No, what I mean by that is we need to see stuff. We need to see people. We need to know that someone's going to check on us, right? We have this idea of God, but we've never seen God physically.
No.
So while we go, yes, God is everywhere and everywhere, at the same time, it's like, I've never seen him, right? So the concept is there, but it's like, it's at a way you can ignore it, but I can't ignore Aaron being in front of me. That's a very mindful. That's a very mindful presence for me. That Aaron is here, and he's going to ask me how I'm doing on things.
If I'm not afraid to.
No, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, so that's why I think accountability is important. It allows us to grow in ways that we couldn't do on our own without community. Do you have any comments or other things you want to add to that or remove or?
No, not that I can think of at the moment. The only thing that came up to my mind was when you mentioned the whole thing about, someone going to an adult store and then coming across their pastor as they're leaving. It's just like, oh, that's awkward. Because there's been the scenarios that's brought up. I can't remember if this was like a weird work conversation or just a conversation with some random group of friends. I don't know. But the whole thing was like, what if you went to, the good old OTB on the border club?
For those of you outside of Wisconsin area,
it's a strip club.
It's a strip club.
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
They said,
go on.
What if you went there and came across your pastor already there, kind of thing, and then just bring up this whole awkward thing, and you could just brush it off by saying, "Oh, I'm just here to try and talk to these people." Well, particularly the ladies, and try and be like, get them away from it. But I was like, yeah, okay, we all know why you're there. So that was a whole fun conversation.
Yeah, if that scenario comes up, that's a whole other conversation. And we got a couple people who need to have some talking to.
True, because then it's like awkward for you showing up because well, then why are you coming here? But then why are you here? But then, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, there needs to be a whole conversation with the pastor, with the elders or the deacon board about that, and there needs to be a conversation with the person who went there and be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But no,
and in that way, you're going to be held
accountable.
There's going to be a couple people held accountable here.
Yeah,
there's going to be a couple people holding them accountable.
Right, from there on out. But no, yeah, that was gosh, that was good. I can't think of. I feel like I had something at one point, but now I've already forgot about it. Okay. I guess one of the other thing was obviously is how do you go about doing that, or how do you go about holding someone accountable to something if it's something that's difficult? Because I don't know, and for me, I guess when it comes to, I guess just asking how someone's doing, it doesn't have to be about anything specific.
Mm-hmm.
But even just asking how they're doing in general.
Well, typically when you're holding someone accountable, it's for something specific.
Specific.
So whether that's a spiritual or a physical, so that could be drinking less. That could be, and when I say drinking less, not drinking like water. I'm thinking drinking alcohol less. Not engaging in pornography, not using, swearing or cursing as much. Stuff like that. Or maybe it's physical, like going to the gym more or doing other things like that. Okay,
less eating.
Yeah. So that's what you do for accountable. It has to be actually intentional, and it has to be stuff that is specific. You can't just keep them accountable in general.
Well, and I guess, so we're, what was I doing? Was it for me? It's even with just asking, someone's having a tough day or whatever, or I guess. It's just like, oh, how are you doing? Like, it's just hesitant to ask that question because I already know you're not doing well. And then I get nervous about just even asking about how you're doing because I know it's not going to be good. So I guess to relate that with accountability, it's like, but then at that point you might not know, or unless you have.
Okay, let me ask this because I need a follow-up question here to clarify this. Are you talking about how you hold someone accountable even when they're having a bad day, or are you talking about just asking how they're doing when they're having a bad day?
You could do both.
Okay, because here's the thing. Asking someone how they're doing when they're having a bad day isn't necessarily holding them accountable. No. Not necessarily.
No.
That's just showing concern and friendship and compassion for someone having a bad day. Okay.
Oh, yeah, just asking how they're doing. Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you meant like asking them about being accountable when they're having a bad day.
Yes. So that's what I said. I needed it too. So there's that one, because the way you were going about it wasn't very clear on what you were getting at.
No, it wasn't.
If you're saying how do you hold them accountable still? Like, let's say, you're holding me accountable for porn use or something. Okay. And I'm having a bad day. And how do you go about talking to me on those days? That's part of the conversation as well.
Right.
Yeah. And in those cases, just because someone is having a bad day doesn't necessarily mean you have to exclude them that conversation that day. In fact, it might be a good day to even have that conversation to check in on them.
They're more susceptible of.
Yep. So let's talk about how you do accountability.
How you hold people accountable.
Because this is a very interesting topic, especially now in today's world where you can use technology to help you do that.
There's that, and also how everybody's so, sensitive these days.
Well, okay. So here's let's break it down.
Yeah.
In order for accountability to occur, there has to be trust. If there's no trust, accountability cannot be done. You can't just, like I said, you can't just go up to a stranger on the street and say, hold me accountable. It doesn't work like that, okay? There has to be trust. Yeah. There has to be a relationship. Because in order for anything with accountability to work, there has to be follow through. There has to be that idea that I know I'm going to see Aaron on days X, Y, and Z. I know he's going to ask me about this on X, Y, and Z, or he's going to text message me, or he's going to call me, or I'm going to get communication from him somehow about what's going on. If it's just a stranger that I don't really have a relationship with, I can easily avoid them. I can easily say, well, okay, fine, whatever. But if it's Aaron, who I see all the time, I know he's going to hit me up on Sunday, or he'll hit me up when we're recording podcasts, or he'll hit me up, a text message and be like, "Hey, what's going on? What's happening with this?"
Yeah.
And I know you can ask me those things. So, one, there has to be trust. There has to be a relationship. Without that, it all falls apart. Because in order to be accountable, you have to be transparent.
Oh, which is a fun thing to do.
Which sucks because we don't like doing that. We like to keep our little secrets, and we can't. So that's step one. That's foundational to it. Now, how you go beyond there, that's up to you. Some of you might like the one-on-one face-to-face interaction conversation, and COVID times have made that a little more difficult. So that might be a Zoom call or whatever. But that's how some people do it best, is that face-to-face interaction. And it's because you can see the body language, you can see how people are reacting, kind of how we talked about with the therapy and being able to text into therapy. Doing it via text, you don't get to see that, I'm folding my hands and putting them across my chest and just kind of
being reserved
or tense up or whatnot. You could see me relaxed and emoting with my hands and that. You could see all that going on.
Say if you were good at reading people's tells, that's something you'd get in the physical communication, which if you're me, it doesn't really matter.
Right. And that's what I said everyone could do it differently,
right,
and where it's just the conversation, and in that you have to rely on everyone being 100% transparent, because there's nothing else that's gatekeeping and providing outside information. It's one-on-one personal contact. And now I'm not saying that the next thing means that there's less trust and less transparency. It's just, okay, you can use technology. Okay. Me, you, and Josh. Well, me and Josh. Use that we're accountable right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could still see mine and Josh's stuff. We just can't see.
You can't see me.
What you're doing.
Yeah.
But, there's still that trust where we're being accountable and open with one another. But at the same time, then there's also this third party that kind of comes in and says, yes, this is true, or no, this is not true of what they're saying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like, hey, Paul's report's good. Cool. Paul's report isn't good. Uh-oh.
So Paul, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, and then we can go back and pull the report and be like, why does this say otherwise? And then you could be like, oh, that's, yeah.
Why are you lying, though?
And maybe it helps with some of those conversations of like, hey, I screwed up. And Aaron goes, look, I know you said you've been doing good, but this report says you screwed up one time. And Aaron can then go, hey, look, one time in the past whatever months, he's like, that's great. Always, whenever you're talking with someone and they're being accountable to something, be firm, but be kind about it. So if Aaron sees on my report that I screwed up this month, right? He can goes, look, it's been 6 months since you last screwed up. Good job.
Right.
But you did screw up. And then he can say, that's where you can have the conversation of like, hey, what happened? Is everything good? Is this isn't the start of something, right? This was hopefully just a one-time, deal. But then that's where that conversation can then start of like, hey, what happened? Let's talk about this. Let's go on. Let's continue talking about this, but never beat them down. Like,
oh no,
Paul, you screwed up. What the?
No, stupid.
Help them along.
Yeah.
Because you never want someone to come and tell you that you're just a big screw up and mess up. When in fact, yeah, you messed up, but for the past 6, 7, 8 months, whatever, you've been doing pretty good. And you've been getting better, and you had a slip up and you had a mess up, and it just happened to do that.
Yeah. No, I was saying that can go back to also being why it's important to do hold people accountable, is like, because when you address it again, in a kind but, as you said, yet firm way, And once you find out about what it is that when you're holding each other accountable, you can then go on and talk about the things of what to kind of like look out for to, help this from happening again next time.
Yeah, like if Aaron knows certain things,
Just
put me off on the deep end on things. He knows something like that happens. He can go, hey, just checking in on you before you do something stupid.
right.
And be like, well, what are you doing?
What was and even gosh. I'm just thinking back on some of our past conversations, and like if I were to go on a trip on my own, I don't know, you just like talk about whatever things needed to be talked about, like before I go off on some trip on my own or whatever, just to talk with me about whatever it is you were holding me accountable. Well, I guess I guess you could say porn, stuff like that. There's just like what can I do to help you, stay on the straight and narrow while you're out on your own like trip or wherever it may be, kind of thing. Because for me, and I'd imagine it'd be the same with most people, but it's like if you go somewhere where you're not there often, it's easier to go off and go into places and do things you're not supposed to when you're just going to be coming back home and you're not going to have to be,
because you have no chance of someone walking and recognizing you along the street or when you walk into the club or whatever.
Exactly. So that's where it is. It's good to, be able to have those conversations with people. And as you already talked about, having that trust with each other on that.
Yep. And the next part I'd say for how you do accountability is set up the expectations on how it will work. It doesn't help if I go, just hold me accountable to this. And then it's like, how, what? Have that conversation. And it may be difficult, especially the first few times. The first few times you go, hey, Aaron. I went to that XXX site today. It's not exactly the easiest thing because, again, it's bringing light into that darkness. It's bringing light into those things that you try to keep secret. So that's why you got to set up that and have that conversation of like, how is this going to work? How do we want to do this? And that's where sometimes technology can be useful because it can help provide that platform of like, oh, look, here's a report. Here's what Paul looked at. Okay. Aaron could go, so about this report, sort of deal. So have that conversation. So again, be someone that you trust, that you have a relationship with. Decide if you're going to use any technology or tools to help do the third party monitoring, or if you're just going to be honest and reliant upon with each other, in which case you have to be 100% absolutely honest. Otherwise, this does not work at all. And the third thing is decide how you're going to do this. Is this just a check-in every once in a while? Is this a weekly conversation that you have? Is this a conversation that only comes up when something pings on the monitoring system? How does this look? Because once you have those three things defined and established, it kind of starts to run on its own then. And the conversations may come up once in a while about like, hey, this is what's going on, that. But I mean, like for me and Aaron and Josh, well, me and Josh, we have the monitoring systems installed on our devices. So really the only time anything comes up about that is when something pings and someone has a question like, hey, were you looking at this? And I know sometimes some of the pings come up because, what was it?
Words.
There was a website I was at. It was a tech website, and it was showing the IP address of xxx.xxx.xxx.xxx. And the filtering system caught that and said that XXX was a red filtered word because that is usually related to pornography, which I agree it usually is, but in this case it wasn't. But I still got flagged, and it wasn't just the hey, yellow flag. It was the full on red flag. Everyone got text messages that I was looking at something I shouldn't look at, sort of deal. And I was like, well, okay, well that went interesting. And, Aaron was like, "Oh, so I saw that you got flagged for this."
Yeah.
And it was just, and it was the conversation starter that we had. And because we had already talked about how we were doing this, how we were, using the software and how we were going to have the conversations and how it necessarily didn't have to be an ongoing daily or weekly thing. It was when the essentially when the platform says, "Hey, something's going on."
Yeah.
You need either devices have stopped reporting, or people have been looking at stuff that they shouldn't be, or stuff like that. And other cases, it might be a weekly or a daily thing. I remember one particular time, um, I was messaging you for a couple weeks daily just to see how you were doing.
Yep.
Because it was a thing. And then after those couple weeks, it trailed off to like once a week, and then it kind of slowed down a little bit. But different scenarios may require differently. You just need to have that conversation and be upfront about it.
Yeah. Oof. Which is always, it's not fun being upfront about it. But even, gosh, I guess like thinking about, looking back over all the accountability stuff that has been done, it's, I guess you could say when it's working per se, it's crazy to see how that affects things in the long run.
How so?
I suppose. And just, this, why is porn always such a hot topic?
Because it's a very destructive topic.
You're not wrong.
And it's an easy one to talk about because let's be honest here. Porn is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the U.S.
It is pretty well off. Yeah. Very well off. But again, it could go with anything. I feel like it starts to kind of develop character for a person. When after holding each other accountable for a while, you could say, I don't know, I'd say that it almost starts to become kind of a natural thing. And as far as being honest with one another, and not, I guess, going to those things that are destructive to you or the things that you're doing that are found to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess a big one with it being, the big one being pornography and stuff like that. It's, staying away from it for a while. It's like any drug, because alcohol, the smoking, whatever it may be, not just weed. It can be cigarettes, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. It doesn't even have to be like substance stuff. There's so many different areas you can go with this. But anywho, it's that first while of trying to get away from it. That's obviously the hard part. But once you're working on that and you're successful with it, for one, crazy how much more, I guess, that kind of, to me, is kind of, I suppose you could say, freed the mind a little bit. I just feel like there's less being weighed down. I guess you could say,
is that less weighed down because you're not trying to keep stuff a secret, or is it less weighed down because others are now sharing in the burden, or other things?
So I would say, one, where it's not a secret, that makes it a lot, like, once it's out there and done, it's just like, whew, you kind of get that like weight lifted off the shoulders thing. But then as it, if you're generally working hard towards it and you're getting better at it, staying away, it's when you're not, going back to it so often, it's like you slowly, why can't I not describe it now? You just, one, just feel better. It's like just more pure minded, because that is one thing, especially with pornography, that hurts the most is, once you're like in a rut of it and stuck there for a while, it's like it doesn't leave you once you leave that screen.
Mm-hmm.
It sticks with you. and obviously affects how you like see either your friends or other people just in general. And it's very destructive, I would say. I'm sure most people would agree with that. Hopefully, I don't know.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, this is true.
But anyways, go on.
But again, so as time goes on, it's like that those things hopefully will start to kind of vanish off, and you'll just be able to see things with just a better, I guess, better light, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, that's how you form new habits. It's just that time difference and change of things.
Yeah.
Where, again, we've used this example porn, but it could be going to the gym. Know, they say it takes about 30 days to build a new habit.
Right.
So where that's 30 days of quitting something or 30 days of doing something new.
Yeah. And I guess, when you bring up the whole working out thing, I mean, if you keep up with that, you're going to feel healthier after a while if you stick with it and stuff. And with that, I mean, the healthier you are, probably the less stress you're going to be feeling. Hopefully. I don't know. I would imagine so.
Working out is a very good stress reliever.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah. So, and I guess that's where I was trying to think of it, of why it, I mean, being a helpful thing for you, I guess, being held accountable. Because it does help out with a lot of stuff. And it's crazy to see how that impacts other parts of your lifestyle. And then again, with building character and stuff like that, if you're going to be willing to be honest about one thing that's especially a sensitive thing for you, I mean, that just builds up other things that you might be more honest about, and just more honest in general about things with people, kind of thing. Because that's what I found too. Like the more I have, gone into, the longer doing accountability stuff and being honest openly with accountability, it's the more I feel like I tend to also be honest with others about just anything in general, really, I guess. I don't know. I feel like honesty just becomes a stronger thing in someone when you're being held accountable more often.
Right. I agree, because you find when you're doing that, you have, and people usually think about accountability as, it's just someone checking in on me to make sure I'm not doing something. At the same time, it's also someone checking in on you and cheering you on,
right?
Saying you can do this. I got your back. And making sure that you're and helping you move on to that next level of doing.
So it's
whatever
not there
it is,
just to sit and condemn you about something you did wrong. It's
to inspire and encourage.
Yeah. So because once you start doing well, that's something you can get excited about as friends or whatever it may be, and celebrate something like that.
Yeah, and you could even turn into a little competition at some point.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I still owe you a tattoo.
Yeah, I gotta get one. Oh, I'd love to get a tattoo. Just don't know what yet. There's many things.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, and accountability is one of those things that it's easy. This sounds weird. It's easy to talk about, but hard to put into practice.
Oh yeah,
because it's one of those things of
it requires action.
Well, it requires action, but it requires that you also be brave. And here's what I mean by that. Aaron, let's say, and we talked about this a little bit, I'm having a bad day. How do you approach me and make sure I'm still doing okay on whatever that is? Whatever it is you're holding me accountable to. How do you do that? Because what if I'm grumpy? What if I'm, how do you bring up those sensitive topics at times when maybe it's hurting and maybe whoever just screwed up, they're feeling ashamed and guilty and they're feeling like trash. What do you do then? Because that's the next step. Because again, we've talked about why you do it, how you do it, what's the basis, but the practicality of actually implementing it, that's the tough and dirty nitty gritty. Because at that point, it's no longer this practical theory of when you're feeling good of saying, okay, Aaron, when I'm screwing up, you bring me back to earth. You ask me these things.
Right.
It's when I just screwed up and I'm feeling like dirt. How do you encourage? How do you bring up the topics when they're in the middle of that? So what you have to do, honestly, is when that's happening, be very sympathetic. Don't be a bull in a china shop. Okay?
Yeah.
Don't be the person that you just bull rush in and say, "Oh, you just screwed up.
You did it again.
What are you doing?" Don't be that person.
That never brings a good reaction.
Be the person instead that comes in and says, "Hey, look, so yeah, you just kind of screwed up, didn't you?" and obviously you have to tailor it to the person's personality. If you two have a very bantery personality of thing back and forth, bring a little banter, and if it's okay, if you're able to do that, and they're not gonna end up crying more. If they're if you have a relationship where you can joke back and forth a little bit, bring a little humor into it.
Yeah.
Do what you would normally do in a conversation with them to make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And then once, you kind of have them a little bit less, oh, what was me? And, a little less Eeyore and a little more Winnie the Pooh, then you can, then you could be like, okay, let's talk about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a time and a place. And sometimes in the midst of the struggle, sometimes in the midst of the failure, sometimes that's not the time to talk about it. Sometimes that's the time to just sit with them.
Yeah.
And then once they're out of the funk, once a little time has passed, then have the conversation.
Right.
And that's why you need that trust, because they need to know that when they're doing bad, that they can rely on you to not make things worse.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know one thing that always, I don't know, just one thing that's always kind of helped with me also is, okay, all right, yeah, I just screwed up with that, whatever it was. And I'm all upsetty about it, just meh, pouty, whatever. Yeah, generally I don't like to be talked to right away in those moments where I'm already just like anything you say, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, okay, whatever, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Meh. Whatever. But so I mean, yeah, also so giving it that little bit of time does help at times. But then I don't know, because I feel like it can be tricky. And this is where it comes to, really knowing that person, depending on what it is. Is knowing when to come in and, talk about whatever it is that's going on. But so it could be giving it time, but then sometimes you don't want to let it go so far where it's just like, oh, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Because if it never gets dealt with, then it's like, well, then you're not going to get anywhere with it. But then, anywho, it's the biggest things that for me that have kind of helped get out of that whole slump or the whole, you said, woe is me thing, is when you realize or find out that the other person that's trying to talk to you about it is also in their own, has their own thing going on, whether it be the same thing or not. Generally, if it's the same thing, it kind of helps a little more. But this finding out, it's like, oh, so you mean to say I'm not the only one having this? Of course not.
But as humans, we like to believe we are the only ones experiencing it all the time, just because, well, fun things always seem to happen there.
For real, though. So it's that aspect of, knowing that the other person isn't alone. And that's,
Yeah. And sometimes in the midst of that, again, depending on the person, sometimes it is the time to go, hey, we need to talk about what it is. Again, depending on the person, depending on what it is, their mother just died. Probably not the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Give us some time.
They just closed the laptop lid because I got caught, looking at the website. Yeah. That's maybe the time. Okay.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So again, different woe is me moments, different woe is me responses and actions. So that's why I said you have to know each other. You have to have that relationship, because it's not literally an instruction manual that can give you step 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what you do. This is an experiment. This is a try, a fail, try again,
Yeah.
try again. Oh, come on, just keep on trying again. Sort of scenario.
There is no perfect
there is no 1, 2, 3, 4. Who do we adore? Yay! It doesn't work like that. Okay, you could be a cheerleader as much as you want, but you cannot use a cheer on this. Instead, it's late night calls at midnight after Skype sessions.
Those are the best kind.
It's, and then follow-up conversations from then on. It's text messages of, hey, you were just flagged on this. It's pulling someone aside and being like, hey, we don't have a lot of time, but you got no devices enabled on the accountability app.
So how are you doing with that, though?
Yeah. You have to kind of play around with how that works.
Yeah.
Now, again, there are friends, especially nowadays in our interconnected cultures with internet everywhere, where people don't live right next door one or within a couple of hours of each other, and they're still helping hold each other accountable thanks to the use of technology and those relationships and friendships built up previous to maybe them moving, or they're really good at able to have conversations on Skype and Zoom and just have conversations with everyone. Yay, yay, yay. Happy go day everywhere. In other words, I'm describing Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I guess I find weird is, if I think about for me, thinking about someone coming up to me and asking me how I'm doing, honestly, I was like, I wouldn't want them to be like afraid to come ask me like, oh, how are you doing with this? Or how are you moving? Like, yeah, I'm doing either great or oh, yeah, I'm not doing good. And if I'm not doing good, I'm going to stutter a lot. So, and then that's the tell.
Yeah, I know your tell.
But yeah, that's for myself personally. It's like why do you get so nervous to ask other people how they're doing with whatever? Or it's like if they were to come up to you, you'd be like, oh, you'd be fine with it. But then when it's me going up to them, it's like, oh, it might be a really bad reaction. I don't want to do it. Oh, I'm scared. So that's just that's me.
And that's the thing. If someone's going to hold you accountable, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to be able to go up to you and address you and not be scared. On the flip side, if you're the one being held accountable, you need to be willing and able to answer when they come up.
Yes. And
hopefully it's not a one-sided thing. Now, sometimes it is a one-sided thing. Maybe it's a pastor or mentor holding someone accountable, and maybe they're dangling like a gift card in front of them so they read the Bible or something.
You can do this.
Yeah. Or other stuff like that. Things happen. There are various ways you can do accountability. You can do the whole carrot dangling as one method. Definitely works. It's up to you and how you want to do that relationship. But what I found personally is that when it's a two-way street, not a one-way street, it's more effective. Because when it's a two-way street, you're holding each other accountable. You're not just one of you holding one of the other accountable. Because when it's one person holding another person accountable only, so one-way street, it could be real easy for the other person to potentially become very secretive on their own unless someone else is holding them accountable.
Right. With whatever it is that they got going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is if you do this, and unless it's like a mentor or a pastor like type person, make it a two-way street thing.
Yeah.
Make it a bi-directional conversation that just happens.
I say, in the end, the better you get with it, the better off you're both going to be in the long run anyways, too.
Yeah.
With whatever it may be.
And I can tell you from experience, me and Aaron have had our learning pains on this whole thing at times. Aaron's shaking his head no. But
I'm lying. That's totally not true.
Yeah, exactly. Where either it was, conversations were uncomfortable at times, or, we didn't know how to address it either. And that could be from both sides. So that does happen. So don't expect to be perfect right away when you're doing this. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make the other person angry. You're going to make the other person cry. You're going to make the other person sad. You're going to make the other person, I don't know, crazy. I don't know. But you're going to mess up.
Yeah.
So you have to, that's why, another part of that, why you have to have a relationship there is you have to have that grace to forgive the other person as you screw up. Because guess what? Yeah, you're holding each other accountable, but you're still human after all. And as humans, we tend to screw up just quite a bit, way more than we'd like to admit. And we will make the other person mad, irritable, upset by accident or sometimes on purpose because it's sometimes entertaining to us. But we have to be willing to accept that the other person that, we said, hold me accountable, or I'm going to hold you accountable as well, that there's humanity involved. There's issues involved. There's days where it's going to go great. There's days when it's going to go wrong. And don't let those days where it goes wrong cause such a stir and a headache that you say, screw this, I'm no longer doing this. Because ultimately, the whole point of accountability is to bring those things that are in the dark into the light. So that way those things can flourish that are good and be destroyed that are bad. For those things that are right and righteous as defined by God's word to be the things that continue to grow, and for the weed in our life, the sin, to be destroyed by the light. That's ultimately what it's there for. That's ultimately what we do it for. And that's ultimately why it hurts and is so hard, is because it's our sinful nature fighting straight against the thing that is rooting out that darkness in us.